All right, we kick off the morning. Sam McKewon of the World Herald joins us. Good morning, Sam.
What's up, man?
You've been in Memorial Stadium a lot of times for the good, the bad, and the ugly. Where would Saturday night's vibe rank in games that you've covered in the old Grandma on 10th and Vine?
Really, really high. I think in terms of like just the whole start to finish, my colleague Evan Bland had a really good line that, he said he's like, being down there on the field before the game is almost like you didn't realize how shallow you were breathing until you stepped out of it for a minute. So like there was a big, big game atmosphere, and it felt like a big stage. There's probably been games I've covered where the crowd was angrier, but I don't know that there's been a game where it felt like a festive mood. I would describe Saturday night as very similar to No Sit Sunday, of that feeling of like, man, it's a beautiful day. I'm excited to be here. Everybody wants to see everybody, and we're having a good time. It felt like that. It felt very, very festive and very fun. And they got a recruit out of it already, and they might get more.
Yeah, you know what? That's a good point. People forget about No Sit Sunday that the rail yard was jam packed because it was it was like 80 degrees that day,
Right.
and at the end of the basketball season where it could still be snowing. So yeah, that's a good point. And on top of the atmosphere and what you took in from that, you think about how the game's going to play out. Because I was talking about leading up to this. A lot of people are making reference to 2014 Miami, and I said I was actually in the stands, not in the press box for 07 USC. And I remember the build up to that, the tunnel walk, kickoff. Place was as amped as I've ever seen. You had game day there, all of the build up. And then it was essentially like a 90-yard drive by USC, big run down inside the 10, and it just took the air out and never came back really.
Yep, exactly.
Could you have asked for a better start if you were Nebraska from that standpoint too, of how they were able to keep that group involved in that, especially in the first half?
Not really. It was a pretty great start. It was 28-0 at halftime, and I think everybody's looking around and going, yeah, this game's over. And it was. And, I think there was a sense of just you came there for a party and you actually got one.
Yeah.
And it's been a while since you've had that experience in that stadium. And I think, again, it's one of those things where fans want to come back for repeat business, and I'm sure Nebraska wants to chase that feeling again this Saturday night. Obviously, the opponent isn't going to be as high profile or exciting, but you can chase that feeling. You can definitely chase that feeling, and you're going to have a lot of fans in those stands. And then people are going to come back for the repeat show, and they want to be entertained.
A lot of people watch 6.3 million on NBC, their highest ranked Big Ten game with NBC. Sam McKewon of the World Herald joining us. Let's go to yesterday. And Nick and I were talking earlier, and I imagine you probably had the same observation. That guy that was up on the podium talking that runs that football program isn't satisfied to be 2-0, and it's early in the season that you can start going, hey, we got to be better in X, Y, and Z, but I do like X, Y, and Z. What was your read when he talked about his quarterback yesterday? Because he's been very cautious about things he'll say about Dylan. Then there will be times that he goes there. But when he said yesterday, Dylan is at a whole nother level, Sam, and he wants his offense to match. What was your read on that comment?
That when Colorado did something different, Dylan was ready to roll. And I think maybe some of his teammates took a minute to catch up to that. And so I think, Dylan wants to be in a program that capitalizes on that stuff. And I really do think Raiola sort of lives, eats, and breathes football. Like, obviously he's going to class, but sometimes, the family thing can work against that. In this case, I think it works for Nebraska's favor. I think his father has a lot of expectations, which is fair. And his uncle's the offensive line coach. There's really nowhere Dylan can go. Mm-hmm. Like he has to bring his A game every single day, because there isn't just a lot of eyeballs watching, around the state and around the country. There's a lot of eyeballs inside that practice. Former players are there. They're watching Dylan practice. So I think he feels a responsibility, and this is to Dominic's credit, that I think he's instilled this in his son, I think he feels a responsibility to really do it right every single day. And so I think what he brings to the table is just a certain level of want to that I think some of the other players on the offense just have to learn to match. They have it on defense. The level of accountability on defense is pretty significant. I think on the offensive side of the ball, it comes down to leadership, Gary. Like it comes down to who on that offensive side of the ball is Ty Robinson, who on that offensive side of the ball is Isaac Gifford. And they've got Dylan. They need to figure out the running back thing. And then I think they need a wide receiver. I mean, Jamal obviously has stepped forward, but they need they need Fedoni to lead. They need leaders at every single group. And I thought it was interesting that Rule said, and I don't know that he knew what he was saying when he said it, is he basically said Dante Dowdell is a nervous, asthmatic kid who can run hard.
Right.
Like, okay.
Right.
Okay. Like
he doesn't get a cold.
All right. So I think they're obviously trying to channel his energy in the right direction. He's very talented. That's obvious. But they want leaders, and if I think about that running back position and I think about true leadership, they probably haven't had it since Jano, and they really haven't had it since Amir, because Jano only played fullback for really, he carried the ball for 1 year. And it really wasn't since Amir that they've had a guy that could step into a huddle and basically command it. And they need that back. And I don't know if that's Ramir, if that's Dowdell, or it's Emmett Johnson, or whoever, but they need to have more command from all of their offensive skill players and their linemen.
If as Matt Rule said, the 3 stages or phases of a football team: learning not to lose, winning, and winning at a championship level, and them being now in a mode of, being a winning football team. What do you need to see from Saturday against an FCS opponent that obviously does things differently than what they just saw and has different personnel than what they just saw? If you are to sustain being a winning football team, other than the obvious winning the football game, what does Saturday need to look like, in your opinion?
I think in the passing game, they need to hit big plays. I think against Colorado, those were fewer and farther in between. But against UNI, they need to go over the top, and they need to exert their dominance at the outside positions. UNI doesn't have commensurate corners and safeties who should be able to cover Nebraska's receivers. And so this isn't a game where you're just like, oh, let's just hand it off 47 times and gain 215 yards and throw for 135, and we'll walk out of here with, a 28 to 10 win like they had against Colorado. No, I think what you want is you want to go out and say, we are going to continue to get better at the thing that we know we got to get better at if we're going to win the number of games that we want to win, and that's throwing the ball. Like, Nebraska can run it. That's obvious. They'll figure out the holding penalties. It's obvious that Nebraska can run the football downhill at people. What they've got to get better at is when those defenses pack the box and it's time to throw the football over the top, can Raiola make the throws? I think he generally can. And can those receivers win battles downfield? Against UNI, they need to. On the defensive side of the ball, they need to continue to do what they're doing. And then in special teams, they just have to play better. They have to play better in all phases of special teams.
Speaking of defense, John Bullock was amazing on Saturday night. If you go back and watch the game, he had an unbelievable game. And the linebackers have played pretty well. And I'm thinking in my head, Sam, Christian Jones has been observing the linebackers and Rob Dvorak, and he's seeing things that we don't see. He's going, yeah, I like that coaching is there. They played well, but the defense as a whole, they made Colorado tap out again. So that's 2 straight opponents that they basically strangled. What do you attribute to their quick starts? Because, man, they don't ease into the game. That first series, they are hit sticking. Yep. They are making plays. They are getting the ball back for the offense. Anything you see that you attribute to why Nebraska's gotten off to quick starts on defense in the first 2 weeks?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. First of all, the culture on that side of the ball is pretty aggressive and relentless, and so they play with just a high motor. And I think they come out on the field with a certain mentality. And I think they generally have a coordinator who's willing to kind of let them be that way. I don't think he's trying to load them up with too many complex things to start the game. I think that the seasoning of the defensive linemen, Butler, Hutmaker, and Robinson, Those guys all kind of know what they're doing, and they can kind of get after it. And White's scheme allows those defensive linemen to get their blood flowing. So it's not a two gap. Let's go out here and catch people and shuck them and then go get a tackle 2 yards down the field. It's from the very jump. We're going to twist. We're going to stunt. We're going to bring run blitzes. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to move our guys around. And I think that gets their blood flowing. Like, yeah, I know at some point in the first 2 drives, if you're a lineman, I know I'm going to come free for something because that's the way that defense is set up. So I think it's fun that way. And then I just think they have better athletes. I think you have to, tip your cap a little bit to Corey Campbell and their crew. I think they're just playing really fast. They're not the largest defense on the planet, and there will be times this season where John Bullock, people are going to be like, we're just gonna come out here in 2 tight ends, and we're gonna plow. And in the fourth quarter, we're gonna win those battles because Bullock is, the missile won't be coming quite as fast. But against teams like Colorado, look out. I mean, he's just going to be all over the place as he was. And, they're going to face a number of spread teams like that this year. I mean, USC is going to have to contend with what Nebraska does on defense because Nebraska matches up real well with USC. So that'll be an interesting matchup 2 months from now.
If and staying with the defense on this was interesting to me because as watching that game, not with as sharp of an eye as what Matt Rule would, I'm watching, and we knew going into the game as well that what the defensive line did to dictate pressure would really help out the secondary. I thought it was interesting when he said it was the secondary that actually was helping out the defensive front in this one too. And so if you go back to the 2 games that we've now seen with more of a spread attack offensively, how would you assess the secondary that has, you got a different combination of guys playing from corner and safety? What would you say about that overall look so far here in the last 2 weeks?
I think they've played pretty well. I think without having Nebraska hasn't used a ton of pressure. By that, I mean they haven't brought more than 4 very often, and I think they only brought 6 a couple of times in this most recent game. So I think the secondary is covered well. Now, when you've got 7 guys covering, you should cover well. Like that's a natural byproduct of only bringing 4. And I think the 4 against Colorado was really, really tenacious. I mean, I understand what he's saying about the line got home because the secondary was good. Well, the secondary was good because the line got home. And I think those 2 things work in conjunction with one another. And I thought against Colorado, everybody got after it. Everybody played really well. It was almost like everybody was on a string, right? So everybody knew where they were supposed to be. There's certain things about Nebraska guys that was true prior to Tony White getting there, and it's true now. They're pretty darn. You can't get wide on them easily. It's not easy to hit plays short in the flats and have those turn into 70-yard plays. They don't make a lot of mistakes there. They pursue well to the ball. If I'm Colorado or if I'm teams going forward, I'm going to try to keep taking shots deep. That's what I would do. I wouldn't try to attack Nebraska in the flats. I would try to attack them deep middle and on the edges. I'd go over the top and try to hit go routes and things like that. Shedeur Sanders' mistake is when he double pumps and Hunter's covered, he's just got to throw that ball somewhere else other than to the flats. Nebraska's really good playing 10 yards in outside the numbers or outside the numbers. They're really good, and they've been good, and they're going to stay good. And so offenses have a hard time. Bo Pelini's defense was kind of different. Like they played really well in the middle of the field, and you could gash them a little bit with those smoke routes. This defense is kind of the opposite. And so I think Nebraska is going to be very, very hard to move the ball on unless you're willing to take the chances and go over the top.
Hey, there were 7 NFL scouts there Saturday night, and there may be 3 first-round guys on the field, depending on the stock of Tommy Hill if it continues to rise. But put your football guy GM hat on. What do you think of Shedeur Sanders?
Well, he's got a lot of work to do in terms of like operating in offenses that aren't going to be exactly tailored to what he wants to do. But he has a good arm. He made an incredible play on Saturday night where he got out to the right and, got loose and he threw an incredible pass, across the field, 25 yards or so down the field. So he has an arm. I do think he's relatively tough. I think he's in a tough spot with his dad. or I think his dad's telling him to go. Like, I don't know. I think it's an odd dynamic. I don't know that they've never necessarily helped each other all the time. And the other thing is, when Shedeur gets to the NFL, he's going to run more than he does now. Now, he can think he's going to be a pocket quarterback all the time, but the reality is Shedeur's mobility is about 78% of Jaden Daniels. Like, it's not, he's pretty good, and he just doesn't run. And I don't know if that's his dad saying, hey, stay in the pocket and, stay healthy or whatever. But if Colorado really wanted to run him, they could, and they'd probably be a better offense as a result. In the NFL, he's going to run more, and he better be prepared for it, because a coach is going to look at this guy and say, hey, we're going to run you 5 times a game. Like, look at Josh Allen. When he was at Wyoming, he never ran. And now in the NFL, he runs all the time. And so, like, same thing's going to happen to Shedeur. Like, he's going to run more in the NFL. I think he's going to be pretty good, but it's going to depend on the style of offense he's in and whether it fits who he is as a quarterback, and whether he, once he gets there, it's not going to be about his dad. His dad won't be coaching you in the NFL. So I assume it'll go better than I think sometimes it goes at Colorado. We'll see how this season ends up for him, because I don't know that he and his dad necessarily always balance each other out perfectly, but we'll see what happens.
We were talking about Christian Jones and the amount of recruits that were there. Sam, I was trying to think about this after Saturday, as far as the last time you had this many visitors and things went about as good as they could, as far as the atmosphere, the opponent you're playing, what that opponent brings when it comes to attention, NBC audience, and it all goes your way. I don't know if I can remember when that's happened, but I'm curious on, ultimately, we already saw one big win for Nebraska out of that, and there could be more, as you mentioned. But as far as the last time Nebraska has been able to cash in on that opportunity as a football program with that many visitors and look like that in an atmosphere like that, I don't know when that would have been.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think part of the challenge is that when Nebraska's had those kind of recruits come in, they haven't played well. And when they played well, it was the Bo Pelini era, and I don't know that they had those kind of recruits coming in. I mean, they impressed the guys that were on hand, but I can't remember how. I think the night they beat Miami in 14, maybe it was when they beat Michigan State, but I think it was the night they beat Miami. I think they got Brian Brokoff and maybe John Raritan. I think that's what happened. Of course, both those guys transferred, but I think they're going to. So they got Christian Jones. I think. So what you do then is you look at the teams they're up against. The team they're up against for Cortez Mills, who's a receiver from Miami, is Oklahoma. They're going to beat Oklahoma in this one, I think. The team they're up against for Michael Terry, who's a 5-star, is Texas. I don't know that they're going to do that. It's hard to say. Texas is awfully good and better than Nebraska at this moment. In 3 years, we'll see. But Texas right now looks like the second or the first best team in the country. So Michael Terry is going to have to actively decide, I want to leave that to come to Nebraska, and that'll be a hard pull. Some of these 26 guys, I think Nebraska's put their best foot forward, and you just got to play the season out and see what happens, because most of these guys aren't committing right now. They're going to take their process into next winter and next summer. So I think they've made great inroads, certainly, and Christian Jones was a key pickup. They got him in, and Dawson Merritt is the other one. So you got to beat Alabama for Dawson Merritt. And do I think they can beat Alabama? I do. I think Nebraska's recruited him really well, and then Alabama is not Alabama. Now they could go 12-0, and they're Alabama again. But this is the one moment where you might be able to get in. And it's been hard for me to assess why a kid who I think really likes Nebraska went to Alabama anyway. And I don't know if it was a business decision, but I still think Nebraska is going to win that one. I think Michael Terry is going to be hard to win, because Texas is Texas and he's from Texas. But I think they're going to win Dawson Merritt eventually. And I think they're going to win Cortez Mills probably pretty quickly. Oklahoma's a unique program, and I don't know that everybody wants to play there. It's a specific kind of place, and I think Nebraska is a more fun place at this moment than Oklahoma.
Yep, I agree. Sam, great conversation. Appreciate it. We'll see you again on Saturday.
Take care.